older.
3-1. Don't mention it. Okay, yeah, we won't talk about that. Kellie-Jay Keen, welcome back to Conversations. It's been so long. A year and a
It's
half, I
been so
think.
long.
Yeah.
Has it been that long?
I think so. The
Yeah,
last
it was a
time
good
that I
one last
believe,
time.
yeah, it was with you and Stella. You guys were duking it out over
Oh,
a man in a dress. Back in Dressgate times, 2023. Different
God,
era.
those were the days.
Yeah. What's been going
Different.
on now? I've been wanting to catch up. Like I've been kind of out of the gender cycle, so I don't know if you're still in it. I mean, you're still a woman, apparently.
I'm definitely still a woman. I've had a very interesting week. I went to Speaker's Corner. So I go to Speaker's Corner every month as part of Let Women Speak, and I do other places.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did Speaker's Corner, and as I was walking away, I have a very interesting conversation, very short, with an American that's quite funny, and I thought that would get really picked up, and it has. I mean, it's been shared a lot.
Wait, like
But
a little
then,
video, like a TikTok kind of video, kind of thing.
yeah, it's about 1 minute and 20 seconds, and that's how long it takes her to kind of back out
Okay.
of the conversation. She's very sweet, and she's like, what about free speech and what free speech do you want to protect or something? And I was like, well, if you attack any free speech, it's no longer free speech; it's all free speech. And then we get onto the gender stuff. Sorry, I've got codeine nose, which is like when everything gets a bit uh, prickly. So yeah, she says. She then says, "What is it?" And I say, "Well, men can't be women, and women don't have penises, and you consider sort of slowly dying."
It's sad.
And she
You
said,
guys are
"Well,
really
what
missing
about
out.
trans?" She says, "What about trans women and cis women?" And I was like, "Men, women." And then she just backs out. Anyway, I thought that would be like the most virally thing, if at all, of the things that I did there. I also go and sort of, it's mostly Muslim men in that place, so I talk about women in Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. Um, but there's a 7-second video. And as I'm walking past these two women with their faces covered, I say, free your faces, ladies. Free yourselves. Free your faces. Right? That's what I say. Walk on. It's been shared 18 million times.
Ooh.
Not shared, seen. Don't want to exaggerate. Seen
Yeah.
18 million times. And I have had probably 150, maybe 200 messages from women throughout the Middle East about that, about the fabric prison of a niqab. And
So
so that's
it's
been my
the
days.
niqab. That's. Are there any outliers? Any women who are for it, or are
Not
all
in my
the
DMs.
okay? So all the messages you're receiving are against it. What What are they sharing? Is there anything like specific they're sharing?
Well, things like at the age of 8, I was told that I had to cover my hair. By the time I was 12, as soon as I put the abaya and the niqab on, like the full floaty thing, black. As soon as I did that, I've never been allowed to be seen without it on.
Hmm.
So it's who knew? Who
Yeah.
knew that I would be seen as some sort of? I mean, I've always criticised Islam and the way women are treated within it, with some of the sort of the specifics to do with women's freedom, and I've always been attacked for that, as if I'm Islamophobic or racist, when actually I'm just talking about the specifics. So it's been it's been very interesting. The men are going nuts. Men don't like it at all. Um,
Why
I've
do you
been
think?
called, well, obviously, because I'm a wrinkly whore, according to many
Well,
of my DMs.
aside from that,
Well, I think they're threatened by women's liberty. It's the same the world over. There's just different tools, aren't there? And
hmm.
I'm going to try and avoid saying it's not all men, but clearly there are decent people and decent men. But it's probably very difficult to, there are men that have been put to death in Iran for defending women against the morality police. So
Hmm.
it's not like there aren't decent men. They just aren't the ones in my DM at the moment. 'cause but yeah, but
Does
the gender stuff hasn't gone, but the similarities, the
yeah.
parallels between these two things are vast.
Is the niqab? I visited London in February, I believe, and just it felt like I was in Britain, but it felt like I was actually just in Chicago. There was nothing really British about it other than a few monuments. And the way that it's been treated, it's just really kind of run down a lot. I mean, there's certain areas of it that were cool. I went off to visit the Lotus Eaters in Swinton,
Did
and like a
you? You're about an hour away from me.
really.
No,
Oh, that would have been
rude.
great
Yeah.
to. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that. But there was just like a strip of that place that had been completely taken over by this other ethnicity, this other people, this other culture, however we want to frame it, and they weren't taking care of it at all. I'm just wondering. So if you're standing out against, if you target your messaging against that community, what's the blowback for you
Oh, death? I don't
in
know.
your country?
Uh, yeah, I think it's significant. There was a woman called Hatton who's an ex-Muslim, and she spoke at Speaker's Corner and she got stabbed.
Really?
Um, yeah, and gone into hiding. So there are a couple of teachers who maybe had a picture of the Prophet Muhammad, maybe, but they're in hiding. You know, we have a very shameful relationship with that particular religion and allowances, which again, distinct parallels with the whole trans thing.
How
You know,
so?
these
Can
like
let's flesh that out. How is it similar?
okay, so it will
Because they're
be
totally different in their ideology. Like you couldn't think of
yeah, although
something.
they are the omnicores. They are the omnicores, aren't they? So you will see Queers for Palestine, for example, is
Hmm.
a prime signifier that these things are this sort of omnicores. Very weird. I don't know how that it's managed it, but
Yeah. Well, I
um,
mean, as far as the Queers for Palestine, there are no buildings left in Palestine to be thrown off of. So there's that.
so in many ways, yeah, definitely pro homosexual in Palestine. It's how is it? So I remember when I first started talking about the whole trans thing. Prior to that, because I'm a great fan of Christopher Hitchens, I had talked about Islam and the way it treats women, and how we should be quite afraid of it, and Sharia courts and everything. Like we've got about 80 Sharia courts in this country.
Literally
Um,
another justice system within your country. Yeah.
yeah, literally. I don't know what genuine powers they have, but clearly for believers, they have a lot. Um, and women are treated very poorly. Shock. I'm in shock. I'm sure you are too. But women are treated very, very poorly. And then we've got things like cousin marriage. But anyway, let me go back.
Yeah.
So how is it the same? So it's the same because they have this kind of almost blasphemous, you can't talk about it. You can't talk about it because you're Islamophobic. So they have the same sort of protections. You can't talk about what's going on with the trans thing because you're transphobic and you've got Islamophobic. So there are certain things that you can't talk about. They are treated differently in the justice system. And the police admit this. And then we have different sentencing guidance for people of that ethnic minority or that religion, and also with people who pretend to be the opposite sex. So, and the other thing is the mechanism and route, which I would imagine is quite common, full stop, amongst kind of minority cultures, subcultures. And that's what they do in order to be represented, is they will be elected in local councils and position of authority, which I would, to be fair, I'm sure I know Italians, like I grew up in an area where there were a lot of Italian prisoners of war who then settled and they became quite um, busy in that community, so that they had representation. So it's not like a sinister plot to take over, but it is quite a common thing, which is why when we've had the decades since 1960s of Pakistani Muslim paedophile rape gangs, um, how they've been able to operate, because actually you will then get in the justice system, in the councils, these conversations will be difficult to have because you've got do-gooders who don't want to talk about it because it's racist, and B, you will have people of those communities who don't want to talk about it either. Little bit like Bill Cosby could carry on because he also represented black excellence and a successful black man. So therefore, you don't want to take him down because you then take down everyone else with him. So it's you know, I don't think it's necessarily by design, but I did used to think, and I talked about this back in 2018, 2017, that sort of Islam and the way that that has infiltrated different sort of aspects of the justice system and so on is kind of a blueprint for how the whole trans thing could operate.
To hack your common law, I guess, your system of government.
Yeah.
So with regard to the gender thing, you've been working on that or been active in that for, I don't know, what, 6, 7, 8 years? 2016, 2017?
Yeah.
Going on a
Long
decade.
time.
There was a prevailing sentiment among your elite that, you know, quashed dissent, ignored or even targeted people who were speaking out about it. Has it changed at all? I know Scotland did some legal stuff about adhering to the definition of woman that you have proposed, being an adult human female. But has the elite itself changed its attitude towards people who are for biological reality represented in law, or for people, or are they still hardline pro transgenderism, pro all of that entails?
Oh, it's really difficult to kind of separate. So you will have the prime minister saying things that you want him to say, or the minister for health, so the person in charge of the whole NHS. They might say that they know and they want this and they want that. So they want female-only wards and they want the NHS to adhere to the Equality Act. And then they've kind of gone, well, we've done it now. Aren't we great? It's all done. And then you get the next layer of people who might be the bosses of the NHS who don't really know what's going on. And then you've got the people who implement those policies, and those policies are still badly written. And you'll have all these people. So politicians do it all the time where they say, I've always believed in trans rights. I've always said that. I believe in trans rights. And in the same sentence, they'll say, and of course, where it's necessary, women should have women-only spaces, right? And then that's it. That's the extent of which that they commit to anything. So then a bit later on, when someone goes, oh, but you're transphobic, I've always said that I believe in trans rights. And they won't actually get pinned down to anything. So I guess the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
And at the moment, the pudding's basically saying, we're still going to let these men into women-only spaces because we have this funny thing, and it's called proportionate and legitimate aims. And if you can prove
that's great
in law, if you can prove that it's proportionate and legitimate as an aim of your organization and whatever collective it is to exclude people, then that's fine. And if you can't, then that's not fine. And that's going to take legal battles.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a proportionate and legitimate aim of a women-only group to exclude men is the fact that it's a women-only group.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. That's not enough.
Okay.
So it's basically a feast for lawyers. That's what we've got.
Yeah.
A feast for lawyers.
Yeah. And is that similar with the allowances for, let's say, Pakistani/Muslim criminality?
I don't even know what that's about. I think there is it feels like they want to destroy the country, not necessarily Pakistani Muslim, but it feels like the people in charge of this country don't recognize it as a country and they don't mind it being destroyed.
Where does that leave you and your fellow countrymen? I know something just happened where in one of your townships or villages or maybe small cities, the government had set up a place for illegals, and I think the locals destroyed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment because they were not having it. And I know that there was riots a few months ago
Yes.
around, I mean, just self-protection for the British heritage Britons.
Well, I'll try and make this really, really simple. We've had decades and decades of men raping young women and like girls from sort of the age of 12 up.
Yeah.
And they do this whole boyfriend method, and they befriend them, and then they groom them, which is a bit of a euphemism for they prime them ready to be gang raped. That's essentially what happens. And everybody knew. The social workers in charge of the girls knew. The police were arresting the girls sometimes for being disorderly and drunk at the age of 13 when they're found naked in a room full of gross men. Um, Everybody knew it was happening, and those girls were called child prostitutes. And it was
Mm.
obviously their fault because they were poor white slags. So that's how it all happened. Now, those people in those communities, the voiceless people, the people who don't have a nice platform, who don't have perfect, articulate kind of ways of expressing themselves, who don't have any power whatsoever, they've been getting angrier and angrier about this because it's their daughters and it's the girls from their communities that have been targeted. And it's all the middle class assholes in this country who are like pontificating over, why don't we find out why? Well, because they're rapists, that's why. And they could get these girls, and they're trying to sort of put it as a, it's because the girls were poor and blah blah blah. But at the end of it, there is a vulnerable girl in a room being raped by multiple men. Like, it's not complicated. It's not complicated at all. So then we had a case where this 18-year-old, I think he was 18, went into a little girl's dance class and stabbed many little girls, but 3 of them died.
Yeah.
And then we had like a middle class media cover up of, oh, he's a Welsh choir boy. Now, Welsh choir boy is a he talks like that, and he's like a nice choir boy. And that isn't who did it. It was someone not born in this country, and he was pretty sure he's Muslim, and people were just pissed off that nobody would talk about it. And when you don't talk about it, people fill that with something else. And actually, they were right. And so they met up to protest, and then clearly some other people met up to do something else.
You've been targeted like that.
Absolutely, of course. But also, if you keep telling people that anything they say is racist, they get to a point where they're like, well, okay, I'll be racist then. If everything I say is racist, then I might as well just say what I want. I might as well just express myself. And you still get middle class people in this country who will talk about these sort of violent, scummy people that went out and rioted. But if they'd been given a voice and access to expressing themselves and were heard and listened to, they wouldn't have done it. So I'm very much on their side because I think they were left with pretty much no choice in the end. And we had a bombing in, I can't even remember, but it was 7/7 bombings. Must have been 2004 or something like that. And in the aftermath of the bombing, people were like, it must be really difficult to be a Muslim because it was like Islamic terror. They were like, oh, it must be really difficult to be a Muslim. If you see a Muslim, like, accompany them home. And it's just very weird. Whatever happens, we're not allowed to feel aggrieved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, normal people are not allowed to feel aggrieved. So I can't remember why I've gone down this trajectory, but that's kind of where we are with these so-called riots.
Is there any political representation or reformulation? I heard rumors that your PM Starmer was kind of involved at some point in getting the family of the young man who stabbed the girls asylum here. He was tied to it in some way, but that was kind of a rumor or something.
I don't know. I might have repeated that rumor, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm just wondering, has the needle moved at all to even just lip service? Like, now that they give lip service now to women's only spaces, are they giving lip service to heritage Britons, or the heritage English, to be safe and to be represented and to be, taken care of by their leadership?
I'll tell you what they're doing. So, on the one hand, yes, they are doing that.
Okay.
They are saying about immigration and about illegal migrants and about stopping the crossings and squashing the gangs.
Yeah.
So they are doing that. But on the other hand, they are giving hundreds of thousands of pounds to hotels in the middle of nice towns to be totally taken over. And then what the people are, so the men are coming over. It's majority men. Nobody's supposed to say this. We're supposed to think of poor women and children dying in the middle of the channel, and it's not. They're military age men. No, we're not supposed to talk about that, and we're supposed to think they're all escaping some war-torn place, which also isn't true. And I can't blame the men. If I was living in somewhere like Eritrea, and I'd been a child soldier, and I had the chance to go to the UK, I'd come to the UK. Like, of course, that everyone would come to the UK rather than live in a country like that. So,
Till
but
they
they're
turn
not.
it into a country like that.
Well, they say import the third world, become the third world.
Yeah.
So yay. Anyway, so they're doing a bit of lip service, like, well, we're going to stop it. But at the same time, they're doing this very weird thing, which again has parallels with the whole trans women are women change of language, and that's that anyone can be English, which is like saying anyone can be a Shian tribe. Like, anyone can be British. Come and be British. You'll be more than welcome. And there are lots of people that I would consider British, but not Welsh or English. Like, English means something. Like,
Well, yeah.
I'm, 96% English. My husband is in the Doomsday Book, which is like from the 1100s or something like that. So his family name is all the way back there. We are really super English, but now you've got the man who calls himself Pakistani, and I was really proud to be a Pakistani, the mayor of London, then calls himself an Englishman. And I'm like, seems like you're trying to dilute what it means so that we don't feel that we've got anything to identify with and defend, which is
Yeah.
the same as everyone can be a woman.
Yeah, I think it largely has to do with there's this contentious term called the post-war consensus or the post-liberal war consensus, where anybody can be an American. So we've exported our trans-ethnic propositional identity to Europe by dint of the fact of taking it over. And so Europe trying to adopt that has to do a lot of jumping through a lot of hoops, and then also betrayal of its own lineage and heritage in order to become kind of like America's Disneyland, America's little historical.
Which would be fine. Which would be fine if we didn't have people who said that they were, there's a lot of people from the West Indies who call themselves British, but they might be like Jamaican British, but everyone can be something except English British. You can't be, your ethnicity can't be English. But I met a Brazilian, actually. In fact, I went to Brazil in January, which I would highly recommend. And one of the women there who happens to have Lebanese descent, she said, I don't get this, everyone in Brazil is Brazilian. And I was like, yeah, that's because you're all immigrants. So there will be people that are Brazilian that probably don't call themselves Brazilian, but they are the indigenous people of Brazil. And we are the indigenous people of England. But yeah, I guess when you're all an immigrant population, I mean, I don't think the Native Americans call themselves, they probably don't call themselves American, do they?
I don't know. Indian, Native American. I guess they say Native American, or they just say their tribe.
I bet they don't call themselves Indian.
Well, this is an interesting topic because you're not one to mince words, right? You're one of those
No.
forthright British lasses.
Really?
And you're straightforward, shoot from the hip. You just say what you mean, and you mean what you say. And that's one thing to do in the domain of gender. It was salacious, and you got in trouble, and then you pivoted that into really like a very productive campaign for women's rights. When you switch over to race, that's a whole powder keg, and it's different in America than it is in Britain. But maybe it's not. Maybe you're not supposed to talk about this, and if you do, you'll either get blackballed from polite society, which I don't think you really care about, but you also get lumped together with all these racists, which means something different over in Britain. People who think Britain is or England is for the English or whatever it would be. So I'm wondering, do you have any extra calculus to do on what to say or how hard to lean or the associations that you would form by speaking around the ethnic question?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I, I think if you do everything with genuine compassion and goodwill, like I don't think someone is not as good a person if they happen to have, if they're in British Indian, right? I consider like, our national dish is an Indian dish. Like we're really, we love what we love about being in Britain. What we used to love is that we're a really tolerant, accepting, you know, come in and join in and aren't you amazing, and I'll break bread with you, and I'll share the great things about this country, and I'll take a little bit of what's great about your country. And I think that that works really well when everyone has that plan. The Indians that came over and probably had a bloody awful time in the 60s and 70s, they had their corner shops, their proper migrant population worked really hard, and they're just as British as I am. Like proper, I don't know many people who don't think of those people as British. And all the people like the Windies generation, it's, we all share this idea that Britain can be this wonderful place where different cultures can live side by side and also borrow from each other. But when you have other cultures that come here that really have no interest in doing that, that's when everything begins to get a bit shaky.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking about English, I don't mean any ill. I just am very concerned that if you take that away from people, that there's something else coming, and there's a plan. And I don't think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, there's a plan, and then there's going to be a reaction, and that reaction will probably be nested in the young men of fighting age across the board. I'm wondering if you have any concerns about what world your son is going to be growing up in, and what's in store for his stock, his generation.
Well, you've got Trump, haven't you? We don't really have anyone. And I'm a big fan. I'm not going to lie. Even if he just was the kind of the let's blow everything up, and anti-war. So I think I've been quite worried about Instagram wars.
Never
So
heard
like
of
the whole Ukraine thing just feels something feels off about it. I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying I know very much. I'm just saying something feels off. When Zelensky is on the cover of Vogue 6 months into a war where I've seen young men being wrestled off the street and sent to the front line, like pulled in, like I can't get behind that. And that doesn't mean that therefore I am a fan of Putin by any stretch. There's just something off about this whole thing. I don't like it. I don't believe it. I don't like it. But when it comes to these fighting age men, I mean, you went to Ireland recently. Ireland is bizarre. Something is going on in Ireland that's just totally nuts. That I've seen drone footage, and in Wales as well, which also happens to have like EU cash. Drone footage of these they look like barracks. These huge expanses and then men are sort of ushered into the middle of the night, and it's all cloak and dagger stuff. And so I think we should be afraid. I don't know who's making these decisions. I don't know if it's the government. I don't even know if it's beyond government. but then we're getting into proper like tinfoil hat stuff.
Yeah.
But there is something afoot,
Yeah.
and we're not being told about it. And I don't know where it's going, but I don't like it.
Do you feel, I guess the most of the women that you interact with are more concerned about the gender issue, but I don't know, maybe they are. Is there more growing concern in your circles about the immigrant issue and the migrant issue?
Yeah.
And what
Yeah,
does
because
anybody have? Is it just complaining? Is anybody actually starting to say, you know what, this is a problem we have to deal with?
well, I've got a political party now, which may be new since the last time we spoke. So I registered a political party. So I've now included, illegal migration, and migration in general is a women's rights issue, because these men are coming from countries which don't really appreciate
Yeah.
women as human beings. So I think the thing is, once you step over this particular line of not being completely in line with mainstream, once you do that, you can talk about these issues. And the women I talk to right across the spectrum are worried about Islam and worried about migration, illegal migration. So
Yeah.
yeah, both of these things are an issue.
What about the men? Something's going to have to be done, or maybe not. Maybe it can just be solved by policy, reversing policy, but
Well, have you heard about all the people that got arrested after those riots, and they had quick trials where
really.
they were clearly advised that if they pleaded guilty, they'd get like a light sentence. And you've got a woman, and so the law on incitement in this country is probably not as robust as yours. In fact, we know it's not, because there's a woman serving 31 months in prison for saying they can burn the hotels down for all I care. Right. So that for all I care is really significant.
Hmm.
And I thought prior to her being sentenced to 31 months for incitement, I would have assumed that you'd have to say something like, hey, Ben, why don't we meet at 5 o'clock and go and kill those X group people?
Yeah.
Right. I've got some matches. Let's go and burn the hotels. That would have been incitement as far as I'm concerned. Or come on, let's go. But she didn't, she sort of, it was a terrible thing to say. She shouldn't have said it. Dreadful. That should have been if you carry on like this, love, we might feel your collar kind of warning.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she's been treated appallingly, like so badly. She hasn't been able to go and see it. I think her husband's very, very unwell. She's got a 12-year-old daughter who's really suffering. But she's not the only one. Like loads of a bit like the January 6th
Yeah.
type situation where justice was not served. And you've got women and men inside our prisons for longer than men who've been caught molesting children.
Or stabbing children,
So
right? Maybe.
doing anything to kids,
Yeah.
wherever your mind goes. But yeah, like men will get to a 2-week or 2-month suspended sentence for 80,000 images of child rape. And then you've got this woman in there for like a throwaway comment that she deleted.
Yeah. It's so demoralizing. I guess that's the point. It's vindictive to keep people in line, but I just don't see it as sustainable. Not that I'm agitating one way or the other, but I just don't think it's sustainable. And eventually the buck's going to have to stop somewhere, and it's going to have to stop with force. It has to stop with force, because force is going in the direction to occupy, colonize, and oppress the native population of Britain.
Yeah. And if you take away people's voices, then they only have violence. It's not rocket science, and it does feel like sometimes when you see the way the politicians speak about these things,
Yeah.
it does feel like that's exactly what they want, and then they can start persecuting people and limiting our freedoms, which is again what they want. And
Would
whose
you
agenda is that?
Whose agenda? Yeah. The same. Yeah. It seems similar to the transgender agenda in a way of kind of tearing apart families, destroying language, making your space controlled by an outside force. The more I hear about, every time I open X and I see something about Britain, I'm like, you guys should just, all the reasonable people, Trump should just let you guys immigrate here and let the liberal media over here throw a hissy fit like they did over the South African things. Cause I don't see how you guys are going to go forward. Just don't see how it's going to work out for the good folk.
It's all down to like I now read it a lot into currency and GDP, and I do believe overwhelmingly that's what's happening to this country. That we're just importing people, so the currency flows.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares about anybody's quality of life. And you do sound a bit mad. Like when you first see it, you're like, oh yeah, that's it. You know, they don't care. They and I would imagine that Starmer is in with the WEF and WHO and all these other kind of unelected, very powerful bodies.
Yeah. And
Which
when
makes
you
me
look at
sound
it
like a fool.
on that level, you can kind of see the calculus, although it is a satanic calculus that, well, there'll be much more suffering if the Great British Pound collapses than there will be if we just kind of get more people, more bodies on the ship, more bodies on the ship. But it's going to spiral way out of control really quick, if and when it does. Which is the interesting thing. We'll see what happens with Trump and stuff. He's messing around with the world order. So, but the world order will probably keep on going the way it is.
Yeah, but I like the fact that a few of the economists did sort of talk about the tariffs and did understand the point of it, because our media over here were like, oh, he's going to make everything more expensive. Totally missed the point of all of it. And you're like, no, he might collapse the dollar, which will improve. It might be very painful for a while, but it will improve the lives of average Americans. I grew up, have you ever heard of Clark's shoes?
No.
Very sensible shoes, right? So they've been going since the 1800s, but it's a Quaker family in the UK, and I grew up in the town where the Quaker family owned this company called Clark Shoes, and they built schools, they built houses, they built swimming pools, they built theaters. They were just looked after the people. And where am I going with this? They shipped out all their jobs. So eventually what happened is all their jobs, first of all, went to Brazil, Romania, and then China. And I remember the impact that had on my small town where I was growing up. The last day, the last shoe was made in my town.
Wow.
And then all it was sort of admin jobs. And I just think that happened to everybody's town. I mean, everywhere you look, we've now got fields of fucking, if I can swear, I do apologize, solar panels in a country with no sun.
Oh, man.
We've got just these beautiful kind of valleys and stuff, and they're full of these solar panels, and it's anyway. I just think we ruined this country. We exported everything out to China, which is something that Trump is addressing, of bringing these jobs back. And then America, realistically, like your country, can be self-sufficient. Like, what do you need any other country for?
Yeah, we need 10 years or so. It's going to take some time and a lot of work, but we can do it.
Who do you think will take over after Trump? Or do you think he'll do the third term?
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe it'll be 2028. That would drive a lot of people crazy. I don't know. I don't know to what extent any of the things that he's trying to do is actually going to work in the favor of the American people. Doge looks like it's basically a wash. That Department of Governmental Efficiency seems like it's kind of a wash, but I haven't really looked at the numbers, and I've seen arguments both ways. But the fact of the matter is that these elites are so entrenched, and there's so much debt riding on it, that everybody's kind of in this there's got to be some analogy to a game where if one person like lets go, the whole thing collapses. So it's kind of like a prisoner's dilemma, kind of like weird game theory where everybody's kind of stuck holding this bag and they don't want to. And on one level, the way that Trump is acting towards world leaders, pulling them in and kind of, doing these little press conferences where he kind of shames them. It's kind of entertaining on a way, but it provides the opportunity for Britain and France and Germany to kind of be more self-sufficient. It seems like Britain, and this is just my opinion, just speaking with people from your country, is that after World War II, you guys kind of lost direction. You had an identity, and that identity was this huge world power. And then after that, you were basically kind of exported monetary stuff, and culture. Like you guys have the Beatles and Pink Floyd and a lot of really rich musical culture. That's kind of like what you exported to America. But there's no real national identity in the wake of Churchill. After your empire was kind of cut up and given back. And so there's just been kind of a steady decline on a strong British identity, and multiculturalism kind of allowed that to happen. And there was a period of cultural meeting, like you described the 60s, there was a lot of imports of Indians. I don't know the whole history, but I can see that when these cultures come together and they all kind of have the same set of values, there's a lot of, cultural growth and experience that happens there. But after that happens, then you keep on importing more and more. There's like this loss of what it means to be British. Like, so it doesn't really even matter what a British person is. Is it just the accent at this point? Is it just the language? Or are you just you're just these units on this economic zone at this point? There's no identity. The thing that Trump gives Americans is a sense of identity. Now, a lot of Americans don't want that sense of identity whatsoever, but he does rally around an American identity that is strong, that wants to stand up for itself. And I don't see any politician in Britain doing that. But if the conditions are such that it becomes so dire or a crisis is unavoidable, then that's the conditions in which another character, sort of strongman, whether it's Churchill-esque or like one of your great kings comes up. The conditions for a strong man can emerge, but until that point, it's just going to be more and more weak men and more kind of Longhausian politicking, shuffling language around, shuffling meanings around, shuffling people around. Like none of it means anything, because the only thing that means anything is that bottom line. But that bottom line no longer is representing anything that's actually real. Like, what does the Great British Pound mean other than the ability for Britain to have value in the world? Go on.
Well, it used to be that we denigrate ourselves because actually we genuinely feel superior, right? So we can take the piss out of ourselves because we are superior. Now I just think we just take the piss out of ourselves. We don't like ourselves very much.
Yeah.
And for the elites, I guess there's still that thing that they are superior because we have this class system.
Yeah.
That means they are always going to be superior to someone. And it's the people that pay their wages eventually. It's the people that do the work. So we've had a lot of guilt and shame. I mean, I remember talking to someone who said about the barbarism of the English or whatever. Oh, you colonized. And I was like, but didn't everyone do that? We were just good at it. Like, isn't that what
that's what's happening now?
Everybody did. Yeah, we're definitely being colonized. But like, I just don't see that you can keep going, 200 years ago, or we did something. Like, I couldn't give a shit. That's part of our history. So I grew up in a city where they pulled down statues, and they had, obviously, the UK really cared about George Floyd. It was pivotal in our public consciousness. And these BLM, which was basically COVID, we're in lockdown, I want to go out for a march. And when they chucked the statue in the river, and they pulled it down, and then they've renamed everything. So Colston was a slaver, so he was a merchant, but he also built the hospitals and the schools and the city, and like brought people out of poverty. But he also sold slaves. So terrible man. We must remember that people throughout history are not perfect people, like, and can be pretty terrible. But balance that with something else, and he's a good, and Bristol had repeatedly asked people if they wanted to, like, ask the people, including an area called St. Paul's, where predominantly Afro-Caribbean, Windrush, which are all the people that came from sort of the West Indies, where they lived. Do you want to get rid of it? And they were like, no, because then people forget how this city was built, how we came here, like the legacy of Bristol. And so they said no. But when they pulled it down, a load of like posh white kids, when they pulled down the statue, it remained, and they changed the name of the school, and they changed the name of the theatre, and it's just it it won't take us into a position like, for example, Bristol at the moment. It's probably got more slaves in it. We didn't have slaves in the UK. We just sold them. So we don't have a
You guys
history of being
also
able to.
ended slavery. Let's not forget that. The British ended
Yeah,
slavery.
I personally did that, a lot of that myself.
Of course you did.
But we've, you can get in a blue cab in the middle of Bristol city centre, and you can ask to go to a brothel, which will be full of trafficked women. Nobody is marching for those women. You can focus on that, and you can ignore the many sort of brothels and sex slaves and trafficked women in the city, whilst you all think you're great because you now call Colston Hall Bristol Beacon. Like, and it's the same as the trans stuff, isn't it? It's the same as all of it. You can signal you're a great person and do nothing of any value.
Yep. You can clean your pots and pans and not have to do any dishes.
Well, I like that.
Yeah, that's
That sounds like that should be with more of a southern drawl. You can clean your pots and pans and never do any dishes. That's like a Dolly Parton lyric.
Yeah. No,
Like,
I really do think it like the year zeroing of your country in the wake of like 2020 is just ridiculous. And it's just so horrific. You talk about child rape gangs, and I don't think any of us can actually comprehend that. I mean, I've seen the report, and then once you see that report, you're like, with all these and like the terrible, terrible things, you're like, whoa, this is what it's covering up. At some point, I'm hoping for like anger to be channeled by a political means. I mean, maybe Prince William, but you guys, the potential leaders are all gelded. Like, nobody has anything to stand on other than pomp and circumstance. There's nothing to stand on. There's nothing to really evoke the spirit of your country. And I really hope that somebody does. But the problem is that you guys just sound so academic that it's really hard to see like the warrior cast in you anymore. Like, it's kind of been bred out of you guys. You're so refined. Like, where's the gentleman with like a sword, at least,
This is why I've been successful, I think.
Really?
This is why I mean, I'm not saying I'm that successful. I'm very thwarted and throttled and
Yeah.
demonetized, and those that do speak up often are not articulate. So you may have heard
Yeah.
of Tommy Robinson.
Robinson, yeah.
Yeah. So he's spoken on this issue. And then a
And
lot
his
of the women
accent and the way that he comports himself is low class, so he can be treated
Yes.
as okay, it's just a non.
Well, those that they seek to destroy, they first make mad, right? And they can make, if you don't know the game, then you will fail, and you will put yourself in a position to be arrested and destroyed, and they'll do it. So you have to be really, you have to tread a very fine line between speaking efficiently and the truth in a way that people come along with you,
Yeah.
which I think I have done. I
You,
think
you
this
took
kind
some
of,
gambits early on with the language. Like you denied the language game about man and women, and you stuck to their guns. And you stuck to your guns at the moment when that was probably the most dangerous time to be doing that. But it was still a calculated risk. I'm sure you were aware of the risk, and you
I
calculated that
just
on
couldn't
some
lie,
level.
Ben. I just couldn't do it. It's not even that I thought this is the best strategy ever. I just wasn't going to play.
Yeah.
You know, I just couldn't
But
do
you
it.
knew that you could
So,
not play in the right way to not be destroyed, right? That's what I'm saying. You still
yeah.
chose it carefully.
You can't go, hey, look at the. I mean, I think a couple of times I probably did overstep, and I probably went into, um, say, let's laugh at that man.
Yeah.
But I think you can kill them with just saying that's a man. Like you don't have to go into look at that silly man in a dress. He should get his head kicked in on the way home. Like you don't have to do, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just be rigid, sticking to the truth, reaches more people in the end, and then they all catch up,
Hmm.
and nobody gives you any credit, but,
Mm.
but they all catch up eventually.
Yeah.
And I think on this, if you can speak about it in the right, like I speak about women in Islam, I speak about victims, like we also have an issue with cousin marriage in this country that's about to be debated. We
Oh,
know
could
that
you
there
give
are,
me more context on that? I know that a lot of your public health sector is devoted to dealing with the fallout of inbreeding that is imported along with a certain population, but it's now politically salient. It's something that people are talking about.
someone in our Houses of Parliament tried to defend it.
Oh,
Like it's, and I'm sure he might have said it was racist, but I know health workers that go to houses where there are 3 or 4 severely disabled now adult children, because it's not just one person marrying their cousin. Their parents will be cousins. Their parents will be cousins. So the gene pool is so small, very, very dangerous. And it's very common in the Pakistani Muslim community. Probably not just Pakistani Muslim, but that is one of the biggest. Um, and then you have like disorders with babies. Um, and there's also, so I've met women from the birthing community because in this country you can't call yourself a midwife unless you work for the NHS. So there's other people that work in that community, private doulas and so on. And they will say that actually that also accounts for what will consistently be called the racism of childbirth, in which Black women, which will be all women of color, Black women suffer more in pregnancy and birth, but they won't talk about the fact that part of that reason is because they are related to their father's offspring, their offspring father. So there's also that that needs to be discussed, that we're sort of talking about a bit more. But there's all these. I mean, you just have to talk about these things. You have to talk
yeah.
about the
You
fact
just got
that
to talk about
these,
them.
yeah, these women. There are women in this country that wear the veil as a kind of sod you to the UK. I hate the UK. I'm not part of the UK. It's a bit of that. So there will be those women, and then there will be other women who are not allowed to remove it, or they'll be shamed by their families. And then we still have honor killings, and we have female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation is most likely to occur in Muslim families also. Like if you're at risk of female genital mutilation, this is very likely that you're in a Muslim family. And we have to be able to talk about these things without saying, aren't Muslims XYZ? But just these practices that happen within this community and this religion, these practices happen a disproportionate amount of time, and we have to talk about that practice.
And the same people who are refusing to deal with that issue are probably in cahoots taking children from their parents who have a gender identity issue and speed them
Yeah.
along that path.
Yeah, they're all that I'm such a nice person. I'm such a great person. Like, I really understand. I mean, what is there to understand with some of these issues? And it's there's a class of people that talk about stuff. I recently went on a crazy rant about process. So what we have in this country, like if I go and steal some steak from my local supermarket, I will get arrested, charged, and I'll go through the courts and I'll get punished. And it seems like that's quite normal. If I do something horrendously barbaric, like organize a gang of men to rape children, to rape little girls, like 12 to 15-year-old girls, if I do that, it might be a review. You might have a review on how that happened, judicial review, or an investigation, an
Inquiry.
inquiry.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Well, a load of men who wanted to rape kids got together and raped them. That's how it happened. Um, and that will be like, oh yeah, what are you going to do? Well, we're answering this. We're going to have an inquiry. Oh, well, what will that do? Well, fuck all, actually. It won't do anything. But we will say that it happened in this place and this is how it happened. Oh, is that going to stop it? Because for me, what should we do to stop this happening again? You should arrest every single person that raped a child. You should arrest every single person who turned a blind eye. You should arrest every single police officer or police sergeant or chief of police who knew this was happening in their town and did nothing about it. You should arrest the social workers, the teachers, the counsellors, anybody, anyone in a position of authority that could have said, let's stop this, who chose not to. That's what you do. And you charge them with being an accessory to child rape. That's what you do. You don't say, we've got lessons learned. Like now, what we would do is we wouldn't let a girl go out on a Sunday night and release her to a 20-year-old Pakistani Muslim in a convertible BMW waiting just outside for her to take her to somewhere and then watch her come back in 7 hours later looking like she'd been tortured. So it's not like I've met people who knew this was happening and said there was nothing I could do. And I can't imagine, I just can't imagine that being the case. Like, if you knew that was going on, what would you do?
That's some biblical level justice coming down for a society who allows that to happen. That allows that to happen. I mean, if the society can't correct that kind of behavior, the society is going to just collapse. It just can't
We knew.
function.
We all knew.
Yeah.
We knew. We know. We knew and we know. And then you've got women that purport to be kind of feminists in a position of power who say, I'm really pleased that what we're going to do is we're going to have like a local review. Like, what? How about name these? I mean, I'd rather have stocks in the streets and put people in them. And, let's have some of their stoning. They love a stoning. You don't have one of those?
You guys do have some awesome stones over there.
Yeah, we've got, near me, I live near Stonehenge. We've got big stones as well.
Yeah, you guys got big old stones. You can throw people on the stones as well as
people
throw
on the
stones on people.
stones.
Yeah. There's when I was in Britain, I went from the big Heathrow, I think, and then underground, and then popped up in South London. It was just like the same place. I think Mary Harrington kind of encapsulated it by this big conference that was purportedly about trying to save the West, being held in a conference center that was owned by the WEF. Kind of like there's this really weird clash. We're going to try to save society by kind of following in the footsteps of those who are destroying
the
society.
old ivory tower being replaced by the new ivory tower.
Yeah,
the ARC
spackly.
Conference.
Yeah, and it was kind of weird. And then we were downtown in Westminster, and I went and I saw the Abbey, and in the there's all these saints in the Abbey, like, and one of them is Martin Luther King. I'm like, why would this country, in their most sacred site, more or less, I mean, at least on paper, the most sacred site and like the most religious place in the most powerful part of this country, have an American icon there about racism, about about the civil rights. Like how does that identity, what does that tell me about your identity? And I was really trying to look around for the Britishness of the place. And I saw some like artifacts of it, but I didn't feel it until I went out into the country. And I saw the sloping places, and I went to a pub, and I saw the day drinkers, the British day drinkers. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is a culture. Like, this is a place. I'm in a place. But all surrounding that was this imported culture there. And I just,
So weird. I didn't know about Martin Luther King in Westminster Abbey.
yeah, like in the like there's all these like over the front door, and there's Martin Luther King. I'm like, oh, they'll probably have George Floyd up there. Probably it's a little too late for George Floyd, but there was a lot of like representation of this post World War II American sentiment rather than a British sentiment. And there was pictures, and I went to Canterbury, and we got a really great tour, and we learned all about the history. But it just it seemed like a theme park rather than a sacred site. It just seems like the people hadn't really, it's just too modern. Embarrassed by
Yeah, no, we're
what?
ashamed. We've been told to
By
be
history?
ashamed of
Yeah.
our history. Yeah.
But your history is like
Yeah.
what makes you what you are. And so if you're ashamed of that, you no longer can stand up for it. So like you've already been poisoned. You've been gelded from any sort of antibodies that can actually resist what is now happening by your betters.
That's why I should be prime minister, really.
Really?
I'd do it tomorrow. Yeah, I don't know. What are we? What are the British, really?
What are you guys? Yeah.
You know, I say that facetiously, but then I always used to think when I was younger, I couldn't possibly be an MP because I'm not good enough. I don't have like this amazing track record. I haven't done all these wonderful things. I guess I've done some pretty good things now, but now I kind of feel overqualified, and
It's a step down.
I mean, queen of the people. But it's very odd that we started to just chip away at everything, and I think we are in rapid decline. Like I used to live in Bristol. All my children are born in Bristol, and you go back there, and with their net zero and their green politicians, like it's a beautiful up and coming city with not a single 5-star hotel. I mean, it's when I was drinking there back in my 20s, it's a place of my first job. There was like a really beautiful hotel next to the college green, and you'd all go drinking there, and like they're not doing that anymore. The kids aren't out drinking. They aren't. We've lost something massive. But then I think it's like you said about you could have been in any city. Dublin. Where have I been recently? I think Rio felt quite Rio, but I did a tour of America. I think Chicago feels like Chicago just because it's windy and the buildings are vast. But many places that I visited, whether it's actually Vienna was quite Vienna, they feel the same. You don't know that you're in Dublin when you're in Dublin unless you go and drink a pint of Guinness in a pub. It doesn't feel like you're you could be in London. Like if someone didn't tell you where you were, you wouldn't really know where you were.
Yeah.
The same as Glasgow, the same as most of Edinburgh, except when there's some touristy bits of Edinburgh, but it's devastating. I don't know how we get it back, but we don't get it back by importing a load of people that hate this country just because we give them shitloads of benefits.
So speaking of political activity, what's on your docket? What's coming up for Kellie-Jay Keen? Posey Parker.
Well, either of those people. I think I want to do more interaction with people. So I do these Let Women Speak things, and we do them a couple of times a month. And I'm just about to do the General Medical Council because they're dreadful. So we're going to do a Let Women Speak outside of there, and then we're going to do the nursing one, Let Women Speak outside of there. I will be going to Canada. I can only do that by flying in because they don't give me a visa. I'm banned from Australia now. They won't give me a visa. I mean, honestly, I'm not monetized on bloody Twitter. I can't be monetized anywhere. Everything's quite difficult,
Huh.
but I sort of feel like I have a duty to keep speaking about the things that we're not supposed to speak about, just
Yeah.
because I'm probably one of the few people that will,
You're in the
and
position to do it.
otherwise, who will?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And you have the
am.
capability. Well, how can people
Yeah,
support you if they feel so moved?
buy some merch.
Yeah.
So they can go to my website and buy some merch. I'm also on Substack now, so I started writing on Substack because I was just so it's so difficult. But yeah, I write on Substack as Kellie-Jay Keen, so I've written a few things. Um, I think I'm all right at writing. I think I'm better at talking. Um, but yeah, and go to letwomenspeak.org and buy some merchandise. But I recently got debanked, so I can't have a store in America
What?
anymore. Yeah. Australia and America, they kept doing this investigation where they'd ask me for evidence. And then whilst they were asking me for evidence, they'd start a new investigation asking me for the same evidence.
That's
And then
insane.
eventually they just cancelled it. And yeah, and other banks won't have me. I can't even get a PO box.
The mail service denies you
Yeah,
human status.
yeah. I can't get a PO box where so people didn't know my address. I can't like
Yeah.
hide my yeah.
This is
I'm
evil,
honestly
man.
so cancelled.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
Cancel culture is actually alive and well. I mean, the debanking thing just blows my mind that Canada did it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's coming. That's coming. I mean, you already see it coming, but like you are actually suffering from the system denying you human existence status.
yeah,
Like you're just like
yeah.
a
I mean,
trans person whose reality or his existence has been denied by the very system.
look at China. Like the whole kind of social
Credit, yeah.
credit system.
Yeah.
Oh, arseholes. But
Well,
yes, so I'm very cancelled.
that's unfortunate. People can go to your website. It's letwomenspeak.org. They can go to
Or yeah.
what's it called? What's the corner where you guys where the women go to talk?
Speakers Corner, the last Sunday of every month,
Yeah.
from 1 till 3. But there's an events page on letwomenspeak.org, and
Okay.
I'm frequently on Twitter
And so
on
you are going to
Lady
Canada,
Gaga.
but you're not going to tour America anytime soon.
I'd like to. I think I'll probably go via Washington because I've got a couple of friends who now work at the White House. So I'll probably go there because if you go to Canada by train, you don't need a ESTA or a visa.
Okay.
Um, if you fly in, you do. So Canada's screwed, isn't it? So
Yeah.
bad.
Just say you're seeking
Bad.
asylum. They have to let you in.
What am I seeking asylum for? Roots.
Yeah.
I'll do that. But yeah, look, the gender stuff is very much alive and well.
Hmm.
Um, and it's we're just gonna have to hold the line.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, but it's
it's very
tied to a lot of
interesting.
other issues.
Yeah, sometimes I'm all over everything and I'm being asked to comment. I'm asked to go on different things, and then like and then there's this really weird thing where nobody contacts me at all.
Hmm.
And it feels like something's going down, and it's felt like that recently.
Hmm.
But yeah, like I'll be really throttled. But I'm ever so popular with other women in the
Hmm.
movement.
Yeah. You're a gem among jewels. Kellie-Jay Keen, thank you very much for catching up. It's been a while. We had a very pleasant conversation. I'll let people know where to contact you and follow you. I'm always excited to have you on. So thank you very much for swinging by.
Lovely to see you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.